If we think about culture as simply the way things are done within a specific group, it's very broad, right? It goes above and beyond national origin, gender, and ethnicity and race. And I suddenly realized that no matter how many times I approached certain situations with a heightened degree of emotional intelligence, it was often not enough. And cultural intelligence helped me kind of fill that gap. It helped me finally understand why there were such differences, where they came from.
That was Loren Rosario-Maldonardo, who is this week's guest here on The Ambitious Introvert. And we are diving into a fascinating topic, which is cultural intelligence. And I'll come to that in a minute. However, I just wanted to open and share that. Now, did you listen to the last episode? If you listened to the previous episode, which was my solo episode all about 2025 goals, if you didn't listen, please listen. It's a great episode and you'll thank me for it come January. But I just wanted to share that I have been implementing this myself. I've been taking my own advice and walking my own talk. And I can't believe in just 3 weeks how much progress I've made towards something that is a big goal for me next year. But I have a Google Doc full of bits of research, information. I've even made some outreach about something that we're in September. And I'm like, wow, I'm going to feel so good when it comes to January. So that is a quick reminder. If you didn't listen to the episode, please go back and listen to it. It's only 15 minutes. And it's really valuable. If you did listen, did you start? Did you start implementing your weekly time to work towards your baseline for January? And if not, please do, because I feel amazing. So I just wanted to share that. Okay, back to this week's episode. I loved to interview Loren. She was a joy and is a fellow ambitious introvert. She's the author of Becoming the Change, The Power of Cultural Intelligence, and hosts a podcast called the C.H.O.I.C.E Chats. Now, when we think of cultural intelligence, or when I thought of cultural intelligence, one of the things that really stuck out was, well, different cultures, someone that's grown up in maybe a different religion or a different country and different type of society. And while that is obviously part of it, there are so many ways that we can be different culturally, and we talk in depth about this. So it can be, yes, your nationality, but also introverts and extroverts are different culturally. People who are parents versus people that don't have kids. And even within different organizations, different teams can have a different type of culture depending on what they are looking to achieve. So Loren really is an advocate for introspection, which we love here because introverts, but also to look beyond this and develop your own cultural intelligence to see where people could be different and why. When we understand our own culture and what has shaped us and what comes around, then when we start to look at for different cultural experiences or try to look at things through someone else's point of view, that gives us a really great perspective and really great for self-reflection. So this is a really fascinating piece. You can tell that Loren's background is in human resources because you can just see as you listen how all of this fits together to make effective teams, to make harmonious workplaces, to make conversations easier between people that may have vastly different backgrounds. And do stay tuned till the end because obviously, I ask all of my guests how they own their energy. Loren's answer blew me away. She has a whole system and it's amazing. And honestly, I think it could be one of the most valuable that we've had. So if you are looking for tips from a fellow ambitious introvert who, you know, runs a business and has written a book, she's got it going on, then do stay till the end because this one was a goodie. Loren, it's so lovely to see you. We met a couple of months ago to have a chat about the podcast and we had a lovely time, if I remember.
We did.
We had a great chat. So I'm very excited to welcome you to the Ambitious Introvert and I'm really excited for this conversation as well, just for my own selfish reasons, as I was saying to you before we hit record, because I think this is a fascinating topic. So I know my audience are going to love it, but I'm also really curious to learn more. So before we dive in, could you tell us a little bit about your background, your upbringing, and really what led you to be doing the work that you're doing today?
Of course. Thank you so much for having me here today. And I am a rebel with a cause, looking to motivate, activate, and elevate people across the globe through cultural intelligence. What led me here was an experience I had as I was leading global HR teams. I came across cultural intelligence through school. I was working on my master's at the time. And at this point, I've been a global HR leader for about 20 years. And so, I considered myself to be a very learned individual and always striving to serve others. So human resources was very appropriate for me because I got an opportunity to really help people do their best, be their best within organizations. And doing that on a global scale takes a different connotation, right? Because when you are solely operating in your own backyard, there are certain experiences that you're not necessarily privy to the way you are at a global scale. But around this time, I came across cultural intelligence because I was fascinated by cultures, and I suddenly realized I didn't know much about my own culture. And as I dug deeper into my own culture, I understood the reasons why I preferred to approach certain aspects of life in a certain way. The way I approach work, the way I approach communication, the way that I approach relationships or free time or not was very different from me than counterparts who seemed in many ways culturally similar to me. And through cultural intelligence, I realized that, our culture impacts everything that we do, from the way we communicate or prefer to communicate, the way we prefer to approach downtime or work time or relationships, building trust, navigating conflict, navigating negotiations. And I suddenly found the missing link that I had been missing throughout my entire career. And it was that cultural intelligence is just understanding how to adapt and relate better with people who are different from you. And if we think about culture as simply the way things are done within a specific group, it's a very broad, right? It goes above and beyond national origin and gender and ethnicity and race. And I suddenly realized that no matter how many times I approached certain situations with a heightened degree of emotional intelligence, it was often not enough. And cultural intelligence helped me kind of fill that gap. It helped me finally understand why there were such differences, where they came from. And this all came from me understanding my own culture. And, there's a misconception that it only applies in the global landscape. Absolutely not. Because culture is way more than national origin and gender or ethnicity, it really does apply for any type of difference that you approach. I like to use in my personal example, I like to say that I'm Apple culture, my husband's Microsoft culture, right? And so cultural intelligence has helped me understand those differences a lot because uh, if you are a Mac user or Apple lover, you know that all things Apple are just simple. They're just simple. Well, I'm a little biased here, but they're very simple and easy to understand. And the Apple ecosystem has been developed that way. Microsoft tends to be more for businesses, right? And so their operating system and all the Microsoft applications tend to be a little bit more complex. And so for us, cultural intelligence has really helped, at least me, not only understand that difference, but adapt. I have to use his phone for whatever reason. I understand that it's different and I need to learn a different set of skills to use it in order to communicate effectively. And so it's a very simple way to explain what culture really represents and why it's so crucial in today's world.
And, as you were explaining that, my brain was going wild because, as you said, it's not just about, let's say, race or ethnicity. And it's not just about one country and another. And I was thinking about, even here in the UK, like how many subcultures there are. If you have a workplace where maybe someone grew up in assisted housing and someone else was more middle class and someone else went to private school, and, the culture differences in just the way they've been raised, even though they could all be from the same city, is going to be vast.
Absolutely. That's a great example. Another example are parents and non-parents, right? Couples who have children and couples who don't. Completely different cultures. Completely. When parents have young children, they talk about those shows like it's the evening news. You can see the couples without children or people without children, trying to tune in and figure out what language they're speaking because it sounds completely foreign.
I am the person without children. And earlier this year, I went to stay with a good friend of mine in Texas for a month. And she has 2 kids under the age of 4. And she had a third on the way at the time that she's just given birth to. But again, that was a culture shock because I understand, that children have different needs and, you have to plan things out and they need to change outfits and toilet breaks and nappies and all of that. But there's a whole subculture around like kids' TV and all of these different things. And then even within parenting, it's like, oh, there's the people that sleep train and the people that don't, or the people that get a nanny in the house, or the people that send kids out to preschool, and all of these different. It was fascinating. I was like mind blown. I had no idea there were so many options.
Right? It's almost overwhelming to see the amount of options. My daughter's 30 now, and I can't even imagine approaching, parenting with all the options that exist today, because at the time, there were not very many options. I think there were maybe 3-4 stroller options. Now, there is a whole section in the store for strollers, and these are strollers for, within the first 6 months of life. So I can't even imagine with all the options that exist today.
And of course, for anyone listening to this podcast, I think one of the biggest impacts, I'm going to say, of culture is going to be the introvert extrovert, because here in the UK, obviously there in the States and in many Western countries, the culture is more extroverted. The expectation is people like to go out in groups. People like to socialize at noisy places. Parties are a good thing. Being alone makes you weird. And, we've kind of been conditioned with that belief. And then as an introvert, it can be very jarring to think, well, I don't actually want to do any of that. So I think this is a really great example of how it can kind of impact those dynamics as well.
That's a perfect example. People still are amazed to hear that I'm the consummate introvert. I had to learn to show up and really be public within my introvert self. And what I realized was learning about myself, learning not only my skill set, but learning about my preferences helped me tremendously, because I understand that the world is meant for extroverts. The business world is in many ways built for extroverts, but it doesn't mean that you can't be a great leader as an introvert. And once I understood that, I had to really dig deep and understand what structure I needed to be an effective leader, independent of my introvert self. Because to your point, you may seem impersonal or antisocial when you really just need time to yourself, to regroup, to recharge, to reconnect. And so I like to create, for example, bookends. When I know that there will be either a week or a day of intense meetings and a lot of high touch point interactions, I will create a bookend in the beginning and the end, right? In the beginning, kind of prepare my brain for that type of exchange, but afterwards to kind of ground myself, right, and go quiet and just silence everything so that I can be and collaborate with others while still meeting my introvert needs.
And that self-awareness piece, I think, is huge for all of us as introverts. Hopefully, most people listening to this have recognized I need that space. I need that downtime. Yes, you need solitude. You need to recharge because that's what's going to be effective for you. But how do we then go about that in, like you say, a workplace where that's maybe seen as something negative? I always say to clients, like, over communicate your needs beforehand. I've had so many people say, I don't speak up in meetings, and they think that I'm aloof or they think that I'm not confident. But actually, I just need a bit of time to go away and process it. And then I have all these great ideas and I want to have that space to, feed it back. How does having this cultural intelligence about, let's just say, introverts and extroverts, because that works well, how does that benefit someone in a leadership role?
Tremendously. I mean, first of all, it helps you create trust at a deeper level. As an introvert, you're building trust. Your need to build trust is very different than someone who's an extrovert, or in general. We all have different ways that we build trust and the ways that we collaborate. So being clear about our preference, and you can do that by, really looking at all of your interactions and rating them. Which one feeds me? Which ones feed me? Which ones are kind of a turn off? And you'll then identify which are the ones that you have to work harder at because you are an introvert. So cultural intelligence has 4 different capabilities with a total of 13, what they call subdimensions that helps you develop the skills that you need in order to work effectively, right, with others. So if you know this, one of the capabilities is seek your knowledge, understand yourself, really look deeply into those interactions that feed you and those that drain you. Then categorize those that drain you, right? And from a scale of 1 to 5, so that you can now prepare yourself to strategize. CQ strategy is another capability, cultural intelligence capability, where you can strategize ahead of time to prepare for these situations, right? And then you have CQ action, which is all about taking action. Now that you know which situations, let's say, for example, drain you, what strategies can you implement in order to, to mitigate the drain on you while still remaining effective and collaborating with others? Okay, so this is where you're strategizing, but you're taking action. And as you take simple, short, and simple, very consistent action, you will then become more motivated. And that relates to seeking drive. It's your motivation to continue to collaborate with people who are different. Above and beyond being an introvert or extrovert, you have different functional areas in an organization that are also very different, right? You have marketing will never behave like finance, and finance will never behave like marketing. And so being attuned to these moments helps you plan for it, helps you strategize with just simple techniques that you can use to communicate better in the moment so that you're not having to come up with this in the moment, right? They can be prompts or they can be just words that remind you to activate these techniques in order for you to collaborate. Because what I find is that we can be transparent about our needs, but even the way that we communicate our needs is received differently by different people. So combining this skill set with communication helps you adapt without having to adopt extroverted tendency, right? You could still be true to yourself, but you're collaborating with others. You're building your curiosity about yourself and about others. And what you'll find is that in the end, this helps every single aspect of leadership, from conflict resolution to performance management. And it helps you really develop empathy. We hear that word so many times, but yet not a lot of people know how to develop that. And it comes as a result of all these actions taken together and consistently.
One of the things I hear a lot from introverts is that they feel safer and more comfortable if they're prepared for, various situations. So I love what you're saying here, because it's like forewarned is forearmed. Like, you're going into a situation, you have a tangible way of going, this is going to be a trickier interaction for me. This is going to be more draining for me. Or, oh, this is going to be easy because of the different cultures involved or how it's going to be perceived. Actually knowing that in advance, I think, diffuses a lot of the fear for people, because that fear of the unknown can be quite disarming, especially in a business or a career situation. So I love that it's a very, very tangible way of saying, I know what to expect and I can be prepared for it.
Absolutely. Preparation goes above and beyond external factors, right? It also involves us understanding ourselves and really digging deep and getting perspective about what are those preferences that show up in the workplace. How does that impact the way that my message is received, right? And how does that impact the way I receive messages? We use the word communication a lot, but mirrored in communication is a lot of miscommunication. And that comes down to a lack of understanding of ourselves and how we prefer to communicate, but how others prefer to communicate.
So we've got now, for anyone listening who's uninitiated, we know what cultural intelligence is, and we can see how it can have a massive impact on leadership, on relationships of all different dynamics. How can we really work on this for ourselves? How can we start to cultivate that intelligence and be able to bring it to the table when we need to?
Great question. I would say first begin understanding yourself and your own culture, right? Looking in the mirror is that very first step for many reasons. If you don't understand where you come from, above and beyond your parents, right, or your family tree, but the history that really shaped your cultural norms, especially those that you were exposed to as you grew up, right? Understand your culture first, then understand other cultures, right? Read and learn. And I want to also say that this is not a way to stereotype by any means, because what we read can be swayed by the author's experience or hidden biases that may exist, right? So make sure that you're reading not only from credible sources, but that you are balancing that with your lived experience. Expose yourself to different cultural activities, museums, movies, or documentaries, all with the interest of enhancing your knowledge, right? Then self reflection and perspective taking is probably the most important aspect of building cultural intelligence. Again, because if you don't understand yourself, how can you understand others? For me, this became foundational in my journey, right? I understood that it helped me understand that even though I've always been vested in serving others, part of my moral code, that I wasn't necessarily serving in the way they needed to be served. And in leadership, that was pivotal for me in my leadership practice. So self-reflection, taking perspective every single day. You don't have to write pages and pages, but you can certainly reflect on your experiences and your activities that went on that particular day. And then really synthesize what you are experiencing through mindfulness, right? building cross-cultural experiences or living cross-cultural experiences is very, very important. And again, it goes above and beyond ethnicity or race. You can spend a day with finance if you are in human resources, or spend a day with, with the sales team if you're in operations. Those are different cultural experiences, but it really broadens your perspective about what the differences are. And you will be, surprised to see how many similarities you have. Learn a different language or listen to music in a different language. I love watching foreign films, and oftentimes without subtitles, because as I'm paying attention to the nonverbal behavior, the spoken word takes a different meaning, right? So exposing yourself to different languages is also a way to develop cultural intelligence. Networking with people who are completely different from you, or mentoring or coaching people who are different, also gives you a different perspective. With this comes a need to be culturally humble, right? That our culture is not superior to others and vice versa. We will never have all the answers. And so it opens the door to a lot of exploration and curiosity, which then leads to empathy and compassion.
Something that was really interesting for me in the early days of my coaching business is in my intake form, I asked people if they identified more as spiritual or scientific, because obviously, whichever one they prefer, if I'm going to be describing things in that way and using that language so that they feel more comfortable, they're more likely to resonate with it and get results. And this was fine for maybe 10 or 15 clients. And then someone messaged me as they were doing the intake form, and they said, I don't identify as either. I identify as religious. And I hadn't considered that because I'm not particularly religious. And I was like, wow, that's like a huge thing to miss. So I updated the form. And, I would say of probably my next 10 clients after that, 3 or 4 said, yeah, I'm more religious. Or someone else actually said, because I put religious in there. And then she said, I don't like the word religion, but I consider myself faith-based. And I was like, this is so interesting, because that self-perception piece is huge.
Mm-hmm.
I asked that question with good intentions so that I could coach in a way that served that person well. But there was a whole other subset of the way people identified and thought that I hadn't considered.
Absolutely. And again, religion is another culture in and of itself. And to your point, the way we identify is really important in our lived experience, because we are multidimensional, but there are certain dimensions that take priority in our self-perception, right? And that priority differs person to person. And that's where we really see the beauty of cultural intelligence, because you can exist within this cross multidimensional space without having to change your own.
And isn't life more interesting when we are open,
Way more interesting,
and curious about all of those things? I loved all of your recommendations for people to be able to tap further into their cultural intelligence. Obviously, in the intro, I talked all about your book. So we will put the link to that in the show notes, along with all of the other ways that people can connect with you. But Loren, before I let you go, obviously, I'm going to ask you, as an introvert, what is one of the most effective ways that you have found that you can ensure that you are owning your energy so that you can perform at your best?
Yeah, right. I alluded to it a little bit earlier. I have an acronym that I follow, and it's called and it's M for meditation. Whether it's taking a 5-minute walk or just sitting on the floor, something that helps me get it. The E stands for exercise. I move every day. I have a rule to sweat every day, no matter what it is that I'm doing. But the point is to move continuously, right? Diet is about eating foods that love me back. Although I follow the 90-10. 90% of the time I'm doing that. And then 10%, go down the rabbit hole or whatever vice comes up for me. But for the most part, yes, eating and consuming things that love me back is very, very important. And sleep. Oof, I need that more than I ever realized. But this framework helps me ground, and it helps me, kind of silence all the noise. What we do is very extroverted. It is very noisy. And so for a brain that's not wired that way, it could become overstimulating. So following that framework every single day helps me tremendously.
I love that. Thank you so much for sharing. Thank you so much for being here and sharing all of your wisdom. And like I say, we'll pop all of your links in the show notes so people can connect further with you.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me on your show, Emma.
Thank you for tuning into this week's episode. I hope that you're feeling expanded to what's possible for you, motivated to take action, and inspired about how you can start to own your energy. I share even more tools and resources on my Introverts Only email newsletter. By signing up, you not only get early access to the Ambitious Introvert products and services, but you also get brand new podcast episodes delivered straight to your inbox every Monday, meaning you'll never miss your weekly dose of introvert-friendly inspiration. Sign up now at theambitiousintrovert.com/newsletter or click the link in the show notes. See you next week.